by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. From Psalm 121. Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz al yitein lamot raglecha al yanum shomrecha hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai yishmar tzeitcha uvoecha
Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and their warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage in the fullness of time, healing, and peace. O God, may you who heal the brokenhearted bind up their wounds. Grant them comfort and consolation, and may you help these mourners as they face their grief. Fill their lives with acts of love and kindness and truth which serve as the genuine memorial to our dear Martin Passner. The deep bond of love will remain unbroken as we say, Amen. And this morning we come together to remember Martin and join our hearts together to give comfort and strength to his family. Mourning is a time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We began our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking his life with the millennial-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. From the book of Kohelet, L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chafetz tachat hashamayim. There's a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, time for planting and time for uprooting the planted, a time for destroying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for tearing and a time for sowing, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace, a time for silence and a time for speaking. And this is a time for sharing stories about Marty. So I'm going to invite members of Marty's family to come on up to share some reflections about their grandfather and their father and the husband. Brian?
My favorite memory of my grandpa is when we went to the movies. In the whole movie, he was sleeping and snoring. Another one of my favorite memories with my grandpa is when we went to Rutt's Hut together and he paid with 2 $100 bills. I love my grandpa because he showed me to never give up when things are hard. I saw this when he would have trouble walking, and he pushed through to see me and Matt. Another one of my favorite memories of Grandpa was when we would go to Grandma and Grandpa's house, and he would do the best birthday song. My grandpa loved blueberry muffins, and every day he would have one with coffee. The thing I will miss most about my grandpa are his funny jokes and his chuckle. My last favorite memory of Grandpa is when he called me the best athlete in Passner history. Grandpa, I really wished you could come to my bar mitzvah, but I know you'll be watching over me. I will miss you a ton, and I love you a lot. I will always be your Brian.
Hello, everybody. I'm sure that most of you know who I am, but I'm Matt Passner, the first grandson of Marty. What is there truly to say about Martin J. Passner? He was a family man. He always put other people before himself. Almost every day of my life, my father will tell a story of when my grandfather made a positive impact on his life. I don't think there's a man on this earth who my dad looks up to more. My dad took my grandfather's best qualities of parenthood and passed them on to me and my brother. He worked so hard to give my father a better life and lived to see me and my brother have an amazing life. My grandpa was above all a family man who gave everything to the people he loved. He loved my grandmother so dearly, loved my father so much, and idolized me and my brother. He always talked about how smart I was. He said, "Matthew, if your brother was half as smart as you, he'll turn out great." He could not believe that I'm taking honors French while he flunked out a regular French in high school. He was so proud of me on my bar mitzvah. At the bar mitzvah, he had a special ceremony where me and my pop stood and cut the challah. He was so happy and proud of me on that day. The man always told me how much he loved me. I always leaned in for a hug, and he kissed me right on my kepi. I'm incredibly happy that me, Grandpa, Dad, and Brian were able to go to his favorite restaurant before he passed, Rutt's Hut. He was so happy when we took him. Him and my dad ordered the world-famous Ripper, while me and my brother awkwardly ate the other things on the menu because nothing was kosher. One of my favorite jokes about him was that he constantly asked my brother how excited he was for Hebrew school, and I'd always join in, like, "Oh, he's so excited." Ignore that part, Rabbi Encounter. He had to go on 3 different buses just to get to his Hebrew school. And the craziest part is when we learned that he got kicked out of his Hebrew school. We never found out why he got kicked out of the Hebrew school. Well, the last true conversation I'd say I had with him was this year on Valentine's Day. This has been a hell of a year, so on that Valentine's Day, my great-grandmother actually passed, and I saw my grandma that night where she comforted me. And my grandpa called me afterwards, saying that he was so sorry that he missed it and that he couldn't be there too. I told him it was okay before we talked about school, and he ended at some point saying that I should come over and watch Jeopardy with him. He went into the hospital just a week later. I want to end off by saying that my grandpa is a mensch in every possible definition of the word. He puts others before himself, even in his last of days. I'll miss him every day, and I'll try to live the life I knew he would want me to live. As I was writing this speech, though, I took a look at this scrapbook that I got for my bar mitzvah for comfort. Inside it had a note that my grandpa wrote. It reads, "Dear Matt, I love you very much. Matt, the real deal. Matt, the salt of the earth. Love, Grandpa."
Hello. Thank you for joining us as we remember my father, my role model, Martin J. Passner. A mensch is a Yiddish word which literally translates to person and figuratively means a person of integrity and honor. The key to being a real mensch is nothing less than character, rectitude, dignity, a sense of what is right, responsible, kind. No, I didn't read Matthew's speech. I didn't hear it before. The term is used as a high compliment, implying the rarity and value of that individual's qualities. I am fortunate to have learned from someone who displayed these characteristics in his daily actions for almost 80 years of life. My dad always put his family above all else with his intentional actions. He was kind, caring, engaging, and had a smile that could light up the room. He observed things that many would never notice and remembered things that you don't even recall telling him. He loved his family with all of his heart and spending time together, being with each other as he held court at the dining room table. His laughter was contagious, and he was always present in all aspects of our life. Marty loved cars, clothes, dogs, and a good meal out. From his all-time favorite Rutt's Hut, to Charlie Brown's, to Goodman's Deli, of course to Chili's, and so many others along the way. I cherished our time together, driving up and down in what became our world, as far as exit 153B on the Parkway, the Meadowlands, to exit 8A, which was Jamesburg, and as far south sometimes as Point Pleasant. Dad always put me first. From breakfasts together, orthodontist appointments, haircuts with Tony the barber, visits to CJ's in Westfield for sports cards, listening to WFAN as we drove all along, even though he wasn't loving that sports talk, and taking me to so many sporting events along the ways, and baseball card shows with Stephen and Barry. My dad didn't even like sports. His interest in sports was only to support me in whatever hobbies would make me happy. Dad introduced me to Howard Stern, Goodfellas, and politics. We loved talking about The Sopranos and all the Jersey landmarks highlighted over the years, culminating with Holstein's, which was right down the street from Aunt Millie's in Bloomfield, and he loved that cherry vanilla ice cream. Dad always asked about the Mets, Jets, and Seton Hall. Win or lose, a lot when we're losing. My father's encouragement led me to Seton Hall, being the first member of the Passner family to earn a diploma. He believed in me when I didn't find a career I loved right after graduation. He allowed me time to find my calling, always suggesting a career in education. He would always reference his friend from high school who had become a special education teacher and rose up the ranks to become a superintendent of schools. He was so happy to see me become a teacher in North Brunswick, and he loved coming to my classroom as a mystery reader for Read Across America Day each and every year. My dad beamed with pride watching our family grow as he loved Beth from the first time she met my parents at Ruby Tuesdays in East Brunswick Mall over 20 years ago. From family mitzvahs, celebrations, and little moments, he enjoyed joyful experiences throughout his later years. Spending times with his grandsons was very special, and he loved each boy equally with all of his heart. He loved watching the Pinewood Derby races, Matt's plays, and Brian's games. He bragged to all that would listen that Matt was a genius, and Brian was the best athlete in Passner family history. It's not much to ask. He was so happy for us to move to East Brunswick and see the next generation of Passners thriving. He loved seeing his only son embraced by the entire Feinberg family as we celebrated so many holidays and birthdays with all four of our boys' grandparents. As I got older, he was so encouraging when I went back to school as a father and beamed with pride when I received my master's degree in educational leadership from Montclair State. As I pursued an admin job, he always asked, "Scott, when are you going to become a principal?" I would always tell him, "Dad, it doesn't work like that. You have to work your way up to principal position, different positions before you get there." Dad maintained his positivity, and who could believe it when I went from academic support teacher straight to the principal's office? He believed in me before I had the same confidence in myself. Dad always denied himself so I could have opportunities and access that he did not have growing up. I learned from his dedication to his family and caring for everyone he came in contact with, particularly the way he interacted with my friends. Stephen and Peter and the entire Clark group he asked about all the time, and Goldman and my Monroe and friends from high school, and how much he loved all those Phi Caps coming up and taking Dodger for a walk with liverwurst and a leash. I learned how to be positive and kind to even those minor characters we encountered in life, from the waitress at the diner to the different people we interacted with, no matter their race, their religion, the color of their skin, always showing respect to everyone. I learned to be positive and kind from my dad. I am so fortunate to have had his love and guidance for 47 years. My goal in life is continue to build on the life that my dad sacrificed to give me, as I let Matt and Brian blaze the next generation and build on his legacy. I am proud to be Martin Passner's son and will do my best to live each day in his spirit as one of New Jersey's real mensches. Thank you for being here.
I want to welcome our family and friends. Thank you all for coming near and far. As my mother Shirley would say, what a send-off. Okay. Maury would always tell me a horrible story. His family moved from Newark to Maplewood right before Valentine's Day. And imagine this, didn't get one Valentine's card. Look around. Look at all these Valentines. May he rest in peace. Okay. I lost the love of my life on Sunday, March 15th. Leave it to Marty. He left this crazy world with dignity and grace. He passed on the 15th. Not the 14th, my birthday. Not the 16th, his mother-in-law's birthday. Not the 16th, the anniversary of Matthew's bar mitzvah. He waited until his beloved boys came. Scott, Matt, Brian, and Arbeth. They said goodbye, and we went to go walk with the best rabbi in the whole wide world. We went in a room to discuss things. The family was together, and that is when he passed. He knew that we would be all right. The family was together. About Marty, he was such a hard worker all his life. There was a time he worked 7 days a week for his family. He wore many hats, loving husband, dad, grandpa, godfather, brother, brother-in-law, uncle, great-uncle, great-great-uncle. Stephen and I were really cousins, but we were brother and sister. He and Marty were brothers. They had such a wonderful bond. After being married close to 6 years, Scott Eric came along. It was love at first sight. The sun shined on our son. He not only married his dream girl, but also ours, which I said at the wedding. They worked together as a team. Together is the key word. When Scott was teaching, working at Chili's also, he was working on his master's degree. Beth took care of everything, and I do mean everything. Okay, now is our spelling rights. Okay, Matt and Brian. His grandsons were his loves. Matt is our actor, and someday might be the first Jewish president. Okay. Brian is our sports star. He will be our NBA superstar. If Brian is not a professional, we have a joke in the family. He will be a stand-up comedian and also a chef. He can cook, he can bake, and has taught his old grandma some new techniques in the kitchen. And last but not least, we can't forget his love of dogs. He never met a dog he didn't like or didn't want to take in. Marty was the love of my life. When you're together as long as us, your way of knowing what they're thinking. Before I leave, I have two funny stories. Okay. The first one was many, many years ago. Linda and Bobby Billat lived in Union. And it was Linda's birthday. Marty worked in East Brunswick. And I said, don't forget after work. I think it was 12 hours he worked. I said, don't forget, you got to come for cake at Linda's. But I forgot to tell him it was Union. He drove up to West Orange. He kept knocking and knocking. He says, oh, they're playing one of their jokes on me as usual. Because back then, who had a cell phone? We didn't know what they were. We actually knew people's phone numbers. He figured it out. And believe me, he came to Union happy as a lark. Didn't moan at me, you know. Okay, and then that was that story. And now we have, okay, that's it. Okay, he was a fanatic with his cars. They were pristine, like Stephen Williams' car, pristine. So I had the car that day, and I picked up my mother, and we went to Dairy Queen, and we got big ice cream, and we sat in the car with Jimmy's, of course. And I don't know. I thought I cleaned the car up spectacularly, but he came home with those magnifying eyeballs of his, looked at the car. He calls his best friend Sandy. He says, they were eating ice cream in the car, and they got Jimmy's and ice cream on the headliner. And I'm like, what's a headliner? So I could go on and on about Marty. He left this world with dignity and grace, and I'm hoping he knows how loved he was and how today Look at all these Valentines. Now, the question is, will I make it down the stairs?
There's a psalm in our tradition that speaks about the quiet blessing of an ordinary life and a life well lived. And I couldn't help but think of the psalm as we were talking yesterday. It's Psalm 128, and it goes like this. Happy is the one who walks in God's ways. You shall enjoy the fruits of your labors. You shall be happy and you shall prosper. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine in your house. Your children, child in this case, shall be like an olive sapling around your table. These may be for those who revere God. May God bless you from Zion. May you share the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life, and may you live to see your child's children. The psalm describes a home filled with love, a spouse cherished, children gathered around the table, and the blessing of living to see one's grandchildren. When we read those words today, it's hard not to think of Martin Passner, because in many ways the psalm captures the life he built. Martin was a man defined by devotion. Devotion to his family, devotion to hard work, devotion to the simple but profound belief that the purpose of life is to make sure the people you love are cared for. Martin didn't have a childhood that many people long for. However, circumstances of his early life shaped the man he would become. When Martin was just 14, his mother died. And when he was 20, his father passed away as well. Losing both parents so young changes a person. It forces you to grow up quickly. It teaches you about independence and resilience. And for Martin, it instilled something that stayed with him the rest of his life, an extraordinary work ethic. And yet, despite the pain of his childhood, he never lost his sense of humor. He never lost his smile. He never lost his laugh and his big personality. After high school, Martin went straight into the workforce, mostly in sales. And once he began working, he never really stopped. Those who knew him say that he simply didn't know how not to work. Retirement was difficult for him because work had always been a part of how he expressed responsibility and care. I'm not sure if he ever took a single day of work off. He certainly didn't like it when he heard others did. But the psalm reminds us that work itself is not the goal. The blessing is the fruit of our labor. And for Martin, that fruit was always his family. I think one of the most important chapters of Martin's life began when he met Mona. Mona worked weekends helping her mom at the shoe store. And near the shoe store, there was a deli. And one day, Martin saw her at the deli and knew that he had to meet her and be with her. By the way, this proves Martin's life rule that all good things come from a good deli. Now, Mona didn't immediately fall into Martin's arms. For a while, they were simply friends. But Martin was persistent and stubborn, like all good Jews. And he wooed her. He sent flowers, he took her to plays, he brought her into the excitement and energy of New York City, and eventually Mona had what she would call her I saw the light moment. when she realized that Martin was exactly the person she needed in her life. And once they built their life together, well, Martin never stopped loving Mona with that same devotion from the very beginning. It was as if Martin wore a pair of rose-colored glasses for Mona that never, ever came off. He adored her. He was sweet, kind, and deeply devoted. Their love became the foundation of the home they built together. And when Scott was born, Martin poured his entire heart into being a father. Scott was, in many ways, the center of Martin's world. And all the work and all the effort he did was to make sure that Scott would have everything he needed. Every Thursday was Toys R Us days in the Passner household, but what mattered was not the toys themselves, but it was the time together and the message behind it, that Scott was loved, cherished, and important. Martin had a gentle parenting style. Scott always came first. Martin worked 7 days a week to make sure his family had everything they needed. But whenever he could, he was present. And Martin was incredibly proud of the man Scott became and everything he accomplished. I think one of the most beautiful mottos of Martin's life was when he told Scott, "Whatever you want to do, throw yourself into it, and I'm right there with you." Those words say everything about Martin. They are the words of a father who believed in his child completely. And as Scott built his own family, Martin's love expanded to include Beth as well. He loved joining with the Feinberg family as well. And Beth, you shared something that I think beautifully captures your relationship with Martin, which is that thanks to Scott and Mona, the two of you could just sit together in silence and let them take care of the conversation. And all you needed to do was share a look, and you were there. But you had somebody to commiserate with, which was wonderful. And whenever you would call him, the very first thing he wanted to know is simply, is everybody okay? Because that was who Martin was. Someone whose heart was always focused on the well-being of the people he loved. And then came one of the greatest joys of his life, becoming a grandfather. Martin absolutely loved Matt and Brian. He loved the hugs, he loved the kisses, he loved watching them grow. He attended whatever events he could because he wanted to be as present for as much as he could in their lives. And he was incredibly proud of them, how well they were doing in school and how well they were doing in life. Matt, I will never forget how proud Martin was of you at your bar mitzvah, how you were a tour de force and just blew him away. And Brian, we've said this multiple times, best Passner athlete ever. You were his rock star. And today when the two of you were speaking, I saw so much of your grandfather in the two of you. Matt, the mensch that you are is directly from him, seeing how you cared for your brother up here. He would have cavilled over that. And Brian, from the stories you have shared with me of your grandfather and the stories that we won't share here, I think you inherited his big personality and sense of humor. I think he would have been howling at the two of you as you gave those speeches earlier. He would have loved them. And Martin loved sports. Well, he didn't love sports. He loved going to sports events because you loved sports events. What mattered to him was not the game, not the score, not who was playing, but the time spent together with all of you. Sitting in the stands, watching his family, watching the game, meant everything to him. Martin was, as you've heard multiple times by now, someone who could not sit still. He loved to work. He loved cars, he loved clothing, he loved following current events, he loved a good deli. He loved his dogs. but above everything else, he loved his family, his immediate family and his extended family. In many ways, Martin embodied the American dream. He grew up without much. Life dealt him painful losses early on, but through hard work and determination, he made sure that his child and eventually his grandchildren would have more opportunities than he had. Not for recognition, not for praise, simply because that's what love required of him to do. At the end of Psalm 128, the psalmist offers one final blessing. May you live to see your children's children. Martin did. He saw the family he built grow and flourish. He saw the fruits of his labor, not in possessions, but in the people around his table, in Mona and Scott and Beth, and in the pride and love he felt for Matt and Brian. And that is a life's blessing. That is the mark of a life well lived and cherished by many. May the love Martin gave to his family continue to live on in the way you care for one another, and the way you show your children, and maybe someday your children's children, how to care for one another and how to lift each other up. Let's take a moment now to pray silently as we reflect upon the light and life of Martin Passner. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, Adonai, our rock and our Redeemer. If you are able, we rise for El Malei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina. Im keroshim utehorim kezohar harakia masirim et nishmat Moshe Yosef ben Shmuel uMiriam shehalach leolam Baal harachamim yastirehu beseter kenafav leolamim veitzror bitzror hachaim en nishmato Aronai hu nachalato Ve'anuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen.
God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one, Martin Passner, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold him close to you forever, so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he find a home with you, and may he rest in peace. As together we say,
Amen.
Amen. Please be seated.